Mark and Olivia Bennett lived in the peaceful neighborhood of Cedar Creek, a place where everyone knew each other and life moved at a gentle pace. Their home sat neatly on a quiet suburban street, surrounded by trimmed hedges and colorful flower beds. To their neighbors, they seemed like the perfect family. Mark worked hard as a construction supervisor, often leaving early in the morning and returning home by sunset. Olivia stayed at home, dedicating her time to raising their 5-year-old daughter, Emily. The three of them were often seen together in the park, smiling, laughing, and enjoying simple family moments. They gave the impression of a life full of love, trust, and stability. Mark was proud of his life. He had built everything from the ground up: a secure home, a beautiful wife, and a bright little girl who loved to draw pictures of their family with colorful crayons. Emily was cheerful and curious, always asking questions about the world around her. Mark adored her. He would carry her on his shoulders, help her with puzzles, and tuck her in at night with bedtime stories. For years he believed he had everything he could ever want, but small, quiet doubts began to creep into Mark's mind. They started with harmless comments from friends and co-workers. They would joke about how Emily didn't look like him. They noticed her lighter hair, her different eyes, her delicate features that didn't seem to match his. Mark laughed along at first, brushing off the remarks, but those words began to stick. They replayed in his head during long drives home from work, during sleepless nights, and when he stared into Emily's face as she giggled and played. The thoughts began to grow, feeding on every little difference he noticed. Mark remembered how Olivia had once been in a long, complicated relationship before him. They had broken up briefly during their early years, and Mark had always assumed it was just a small mistake, a temporary break. But now he wondered if something had happened during that time that Olivia never told him about. One afternoon, while Olivia was grocery shopping, Mark searched through an old wooden drawer in their bedroom. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe something to quiet his restless mind. Beneath a pile of old letters and forgotten keepsakes, he found a photograph. It was a picture of Olivia and another man, taken years before. The man had light brown hair, striking blue eyes, and a broad smile. Mark stared at the photograph, his hands shaking slightly. The man's eyes looked too familiar. They were the same shade of blue as Emily's. His heart pounded. He had no idea who the man was, but he knew he had to find out. Olivia had never mentioned him. The image burned into his memory, refusing to fade. Mark slipped the photograph into his wallet and put everything else back exactly as he found it. From that moment, the doubts transformed into a quiet obsession. He couldn't confront Olivia, not yet. He needed proof, something undeniable. Mark began to distance himself emotionally, pretending nothing was wrong, while secretly gathering pieces of a puzzle he was desperate to solve. He watched Emily more closely, comparing her every feature to his own. He even began to notice how she laughed like Olivia, but had mannerisms that reminded him of no one in his family. As the weight of his suspicions grew heavier, Mark felt trapped in a silent storm that no one else could see. His once perfect life, his carefully built world, now stood on shaky ground. The fear of betrayal gnawed at him, pulling him deeper into dark, unanswered questions. He told himself he was searching for the truth, but what he was really doing was preparing for the moment that truth would destroy everything. Mark's life began to revolve around finding the truth. The photograph had planted a seed of doubt that he could no longer ignore. Every interaction with Olivia felt like a performance, a strained effort to appear normal while his mind spun in endless circles. He spent his days pretending to be the same loving husband and father, but his nights were consumed by quiet investigations. He started searching through Olivia's old belongings when she wasn't around, looking for any hidden messages, letters, or photos that could connect her to the man from the photograph. The more he searched, the more restless he became. Driven by a need for certainty, Mark decided to take a step he never imagined he would. He carefully collected strands of Emily's hair from her hairbrush when no one was watching. His hands trembled as he sealed them inside a small plastic bag. He sent the sample to a private DNA testing company, hoping for an answer that would either destroy his fears or confirm them. The waiting period was unbearable. Each passing day felt like a lifetime, and Mark found himself spiraling deeper into suspicion and anger. While waiting for the test results, Mark spent hours digging into Olivia's past. He scrolled through her old social media profiles, followed leads, and contacted people who had known her during her college years. His search eventually led him to the man in the photograph. His name was Jason Miller. Mark discovered that Jason and Olivia had been close during the brief period when Mark and Olivia had broken up. Friends described Jason as Olivia's old flame, someone who had suddenly disappeared from her life around the time Olivia and Mark reunited. Mark's stomach twisted as he pieced the timeline together. Emily's birth had followed shortly after. The more Mark learned, the angrier he became. Every memory, every family trip, every quiet evening at home now seemed tainted. He wondered how Olivia had managed to live with this secret all these years, smiling and pretending that everything was fine. Mark started to believe that his entire life had been built on a lie carefully crafted by the woman he trusted most. Even though Olivia never gave him any real reason to doubt her before, Mark could no longer see past what he thought was betrayal. The results from the DNA test arrived in a plain envelope. Mark opened it in his truck, his hands cold and sweating. As his eyes scanned the paper, his worst fear was confirmed. Emily was not his biological daughter. The words on the report were clear and final. The ground beneath him seemed to vanish. A wave of emotions flooded his chest: shock, disbelief, rage, sadness. The certainty of betrayal overwhelmed him. For days, Mark wandered through his routine like a ghost. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He looked at Emily and felt a sharp pain in his chest. She was innocent in all of this, but Mark could not separate her from the truth that haunted him. The image of Jason Miller lingered in his mind, flashing in moments when he tried to find peace. Olivia's smile now felt like a cruel reminder of the life he had unknowingly been living. Instead of finding clarity, the truth only deepened his misery. He didn't know what to do with the knowledge he now carried. He didn't know if he should confront Olivia, leave, or pretend he never found out. But anger, like a growing fire, consumed him. He began to replay imagined scenes over and over in his head, envisioning what he would say, what he would do. In his mind, Olivia's betrayal became the single defining moment of his life, and soon, that betrayal would demand a terrible response. Mark's world became darker with each passing day. The weight of the DNA results consumed him entirely. What had once been his loving home now felt like a cage, suffocating and cold. Every smile from Olivia, every innocent word from Emily, now felt like sharp needles pressing into his skin. He could no longer see them as his family. The betrayal he believed Livye had committed poisoned every moment he spent under the same roof with her. His mind twisted the memories, reshaping their history into something ugly and false. He stopped talking to his coworkers and avoided his friends. He withdrew from family gatherings, barely answered phone calls, and became distant at home. Livye noticed his silence and his cold stares, but she thought he was simply stressed from work. She made gentle efforts to reconnect with him, cooking his favorite meals, asking about his day, suggesting family outings, but Mark remained hollow and unreachable. He no longer saw Livye as his wife. In his eyes, she had deceived him in the most unforgivable way, and the more he thought about it, the more he convinced himself that she had intentionally trapped him into raising another man's child. His obsession deepened until his thoughts left no room for anything else. He didn't consider counseling or divorce. Those options never entered his mind. All he could focus on was the betrayal and the rage it ignited. He became a silent storm, building intensity, waiting for the moment to explode. The quiet days passed slowly, as if time itself was dragging him toward a terrible choice he had already made in his heart. One evening, Mark carefully set his plan in motion. He waited for a night when everything was calm. Emily was upstairs, fast asleep in her room. The soft sounds of her breathing and the gentle rhythm of the house provided a cruel backdrop to what Mark had decided to do. He picked the moment Livye was relaxed and unsuspecting. He presented the photograph of Jason Miller and the DNA report without a word. Livye's face drained of color as she processed what he was showing her. Her hands trembled and her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. She tried to speak, to explain, but Mark's mind was already closed. To him, no explanation mattered. The anger inside him boiled over without warning. It was like something uncontrollable had snapped inside him, releasing years of bottled frustration, hurt, and betrayal all at once. He lashed out violently, his actions fast and brutal. It happened so quickly that Livye didn't have a chance to escape or defend herself. The force of his attack left her lifeless on the floor. Within minutes, the neighbors heard loud thuds and muffled sounds, and immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they found Mark sitting on the edge of the couch, staring blankly at the floor. His hands were covered in blood, but he showed no emotion, no resistance, no effort to explain. He simply sat there, drained and silent, as if the storm inside him had finally passed, leaving him empty. Emily was found upstairs, still asleep, unaware of what had just unfolded in her home. The officers quickly removed her from the house while securing the scene. As the investigation began, the house that once looked like a happy family home was now marked with crime scene tape, the air heavy with tragedy. Mark offered no defense, no denial, and no escape attempt. The truth had come to light, and his response had turned a painful discovery into an irreversible nightmare. What started as quiet suspicions had ended in a moment of unimaginable violence that would forever shatter the lives connected to it. News of the tragedy spread quickly throughout the Cedar Creek community. People who once admired the Bennett family now gathered in hushed groups, shocked and confused. The family everyone thought was perfect had been destroyed in a single evening. No one could understand how it had happened so suddenly or why Mark, who had always seemed like a devoted husband and father, could commit such a brutal act. Neighbors who had seen them laughing and walking together only days before now struggled to make sense of the crime that had unfolded. Just steps away from their own homes, the police immediately began piecing together the story. The DNA report was found lying near Olivier's body, along with the old photograph of Jason Miller. These items quickly provided the investigators with the missing context. It didn't take long for Mark to confess. He gave a simple, direct explanation. He said Olivia had betrayed him by hiding the truth about Emily's real father. He admitted to planning the confrontation and knew exactly what he wanted to do once he had proof. He showed no signs of regret during the initial interviews. His voice was calm and his face emotionless as he explained the steps that had led him to that fatal moment. Detectives spoke with Olivia's friends and family, slowly uncovering details about the couple's history. Olivia's best friend revealed that Olivia had once confessed her uncertainty about Emily's biological father. She had discovered the possibility years after Emily was born, but chose to keep it to herself, believing the secret would only destroy their family. She had convinced herself that Mark was Emily's real father in every way that mattered, even if biology suggested otherwise. Her decision to protect her family from the truth had tragically set the stage for its collapse. The court documents painted a complete picture. Mark's growing suspicions, his secret DNA test, the emotional distance that grew between them, and finally, the confrontation that turned deadly. Prosecutors argued that Mark had ample time to walk away, to choose another path, but instead, he carefully built toward violence. They presented him as a man who allowed his anger to blind him to reason, a man who prioritized his wounded pride over the life of the woman who had shared her life with him. Emily, too young to fully understand what had happened, was taken into the care of Olivia's parents. The trauma would shape her life in ways no one could predict. Her childhood was stolen in a single night. She lost both her parents, one to death and the other to a prison sentence. Psychologists were brought in to help Emily process the tragedy, but no amount of support could fully erase the shadow now cast over her life. Public reaction to the case was divided. Some people sympathized with Mark, believing the betrayal was too devastating to bear. Others condemned him, arguing that no betrayal justified such a violent response. Debates filled news segments, talk shows, and online forums, but none of those discussions could undo what had been done. Mark remained detached throughout the legal process. He attended every court session without emotion, never once breaking down or offering an apology. It was as if he had already disappeared inside himself long before his arrest. His silence became as much a part of the story as the crime itself. Friends who had known him for years said he had simply become a man they no longer recognized. The community eventually moved on, though the Bennett house stood as a constant reminder of what had happened there. Families avoided walking past it, and some even moved away, unable to shake the chilling memory of the family that had once seemed so perfect, but had been torn apart by a secret that could not stay buried. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence as Mark sat through his trial, showing no emotion while the details of his crime were laid out for everyone to hear. The prosecutors carefully presented the timeline, the evidence, and Mark's cold confession. They made it clear that this was not an accident, not a sudden loss of control without warning. It was a planned confrontation driven by his belief that Olivia had betrayed him beyond forgiveness. They emphasized that Mark had gathered proof, waited for the right moment, and chosen violence instead of walking away. The defense argued that Mark's mind had been shattered by the discovery. They claimed that years of loving Emily as his own daughter had made the truth unbearable. His world collapsed in seconds, and in that instant, something inside him broke permanently. They asked the court to see him as a man driven to madness by pain and betrayal. The defense's strategy, however, did not bring much sympathy. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses took the stand and shared memories of the Bennett family. Neighbors described them as quiet and pleasant, never once suspecting that such darkness was growing inside their home. Olivia's close friends spoke of her deep love for Emily and her fears about the secret she carried. They explained that Olivia's choice to hide the truth was not meant to harm anyone, but to protect the family she had worked so hard to build. The trial moved quickly. There was no need to prove guilt. Mark had already confessed. The question was whether the court would consider his emotional state as a reason for a lighter sentence. In the end, the judge handed down the decision firmly. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge made it clear that even the deepest betrayal did not give anyone the right to take another life. The courtroom fell silent as the sentence was announced. Mark remained still, showing no reaction. It was as if he had accepted his fate long before the trial began. Emily, now in the care of her grandparents, would grow up under the shadow of the crime that tore her family apart. She would carry the burden of knowing that the man she called father had ended her mother's life because of a truth she had no control over. Psychologists worked with her for years, helping her navigate the confusion and pain that filled her young mind. As she grew older, the full weight of what had happened settled in her heart. She would never fully understand how love could so quickly turn to violence, nor why her mother's secret had led to such a brutal end. The Bennett house was eventually sold to another family, but its dark history remained known throughout Cedar Creek. People still whispered about the tragedy, and the story stayed alive in the town's memory long after the headlines faded. Some neighbors avoided the street entirely, while others paused when walking past, their minds drifting to what had happened behind those walls. The story of Mark, Olivia, and Emily became a warning about secrets, trust, and the devastating consequences of unchecked anger. The perfect family image that once inspired others had been shattered forever. Mark spent his remaining days in prison, isolated, rarely speaking to anyone. He never reached out to Emily, never wrote letters, never tried to explain himself. It was as if he chose to disappear from her life entirely, leaving her to grow up with nothing but questions and a silent father who had once called her his own. The tragedy left deep scars, not just on one family, but on an entire community that would never again look at love, betrayal, or family in quite the same way.